All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we're talking about the San Francisco 49ers, and I am joined by Gary Thorpe from Let's Talk Sport. He is across the pond, as they say. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Absolutely. Well, anytime we talk about football is a good day, especially after the draft and when we start to see seasons taking place, taking shape. Now that we've got the schedule and everything, always an exciting time to kind of look at what your teams have done and look at expectations. And when you look at the 49ers and you look at the NFC, they are they've been in that right up there in that conversation for the last few years, and obviously they're going to be this year because of their defense. When you look at this team, what do you see kind of maybe that this team has kind of really needed to kind of get that spark? Now, obviously it's quarterback, right? I mean, what are some other things that you kind of see for this team going into the training camp?
Yeah, so it's been a great sort of couple of weeks for football fans, as you say. There's schedule release, the draft, the rookie camps. Everything's kind of like, oh, you can feel that football's coming back. That sort of little fizz that you get when you know football's coming has happened. For the Niners particularly, I thought it was a great draft for what we needed. We were in as you say, a very lucky, privileged position at the moment as a Niners fan, because we're in the mix. We've been to, multiple NFC championship games in the last 2 or 3 years, been to a couple of Super Bowls. We're in the mix. I think we're first, second, third seed this year. People are kind of putting us in there, Eagles and in us type thing, which kind of is fair compared to last year. And I think we're all in there. But the draft itself, I thought, we went out and we drafted needed players. Robbie's going. We know Robbie's going to get a lot of money. So we kind of had to go and get a kicker. The best kicker in the draft was there on our. Yes, was it a third round? Was he too high for a third round? He wasn't going to be there when it came back, So it's like, I've got no problem with taking a kicker. He seems like he's kicked well for Michigan. He seems like he's got the leg. One of the things that we've talked about in the UK group is that the worry with Robbie, yes, he can nail it from 20, 30, 35 and 40 maybe. But kickoffs were a worry for us because you knew it was coming back, right? Most kickoffs now in the NFL sail out the back of the end zone. Don't give the special teams a chance. With Robbie, it always felt like there could have been a chance. There was always a return potentially available. He just didn't seem to get the leg to get it out the end zone. Doesn't seem to be a problem with Moody. So, that's a plus. And as I say, tight end, I like the Latu pick. I love the Jair Brown pick. Going up for him for Penn State, he's got a lot of that sort of intangible. You see it, and I've read a lot of stuff, because we devour NFL content as we do, his measurables, his 40 time wasn't quick, and et cetera, et cetera. They said the same about Hufanga. They said the same about a number of players on our defense, but and what I'm reading is he plays quicker than his measurables. He's got that anticipation. He's got Hufanga-esque, he makes a play and he goes. He doesn't kind of think and take those split seconds. So I love that pick. The Latu pick seems like a nice sort of. We needed to give George Kittle a bit of help because he's a machine, but machines break, unfortunately. And if he's playing every game, it seems that Latu's one of those ones who can substitute in more from the passing game of a tight end. Whereas we had Ross Dwelly as a blocker, but Cameron Latu seems like a more of a passing tight end. So I like them. Some of the later rounds took a bit of a flyer on. I think Beefy Beal at linebacker looks like an Al Shire almost plug-in replacement because we know he's going to go. So that sounds like a good one. Some of the linebackers and an extra tight end. We do need to bulk up our wide receiver core. I like Ronnie Bell. I like the pick. I think it was Isaiah Washington they picked up and then drafted free agency. Seems a big body that might be useful. I was surprised we didn't take an O-line because I think O-line is probably our weakest unit on the team. You go through the team, our defense updated, getting Mooney Ward in our backfield last year really brought the secondary on. Then obviously our front seven is like best in the league. So I don't think anyone would argue that we've got the best front four and the linebacking core together as a front seven. Running backs with McCaffrey and the numerous draft picks that we've got at running back is pretty solid. wide receiver core, I think, is not elite. We've got a couple of very good receivers, but I don't think our receiving core is elite. We've got one, obviously, game-changing receiver in Debo, running back, wide back, Debo back, whatever you call him, right? But I don't think the depth of that isn't as good as some teams.
Yeah,
but the O-line was the one that got me.
Yeah, obviously O-line. I mean, you've got was it
Trent Williams, right? Who's
Trent Williams there, but yeah, other than
99, that, and then everything else, just it's a real drop off. And I think Colton McKivitz is going to have to step in because we had to let Mike McGlinchey go to Denver because he got paid, and we weren't going to pay that sort of money because of cap and everybody else needing money. But it did seem like there was a chance in this draft because it was a deep draft of talent to pick up. So I know we got some enough drafted free agency. Got a guy from Hawaii, and I think we got a couple of them to play around with. But it was surprising they didn't take one in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, with the offensive line, I mean, you can probably find people later on in the draft and even undrafted players, but really more than not, you need to have that top end, talent in the draft. At least an anchor are there. And obviously when you look at the 49ers too, I mean, we talked about the running back situation and, Christian McCaffrey, bringing him in. I mean, he is an immense talent. And you looked at
changed our season getting him.
Absolutely. And so talk a little bit about him and then the rest of the running backs and where they fit into the offense.
Yeah. So obviously I think one of the, everyone said, well, you've given up a lot for McCaffrey last year. And I think quite quickly they kind of went, actually, you got him pretty cheap for what he did for our, he literally, it seemed like he was the missing piece for Shanahan's offense. He was I think he was the back that Shanahan hoped McKinnon would be. We kept McKinnon in for a long time. We hoped, and he never made it. And he went to Kansas and made it, damn him. But anyway, not bitter about that at all. But yeah, McCaffrey, when he came in, he seemed to just unlock that level of defense because, having an elite back like him who can break tackles. And, I've been surprised watching him. I didn't watch him that much, but I've been surprised at his turn speed and how quickly he hits holes and how quickly he can go from, 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage to 5 yards ahead of it. And it's just like, this guy's like, he's got it. And it's unlocked so much screens and passes and everything else. But just the sheer way he just hits holes in that outside lane that we like to run just really opened up a lot of holes and a lot of doors. Behind him is where it kind of gets really interesting because, as you say, you've got Elijah Mitchell there. We've got Tyron Davis-Price. We've got Jordan Mason, who came out of nowhere as an undrafted free agent, and blew it up. And Trey Sermon, who we did draft before Elijah Mitchell, we had let go because, we couldn't fit yet another third-round running back draft pick in our squad. It's an interesting one. I hope Mitchell comes back because he was immense in his rookie season. Obviously got completely banged up, injured last year, didn't really see him. The difference between them is what intrigues me or hopefully intrigues most 49ers fans is that, McCaffrey's this all-action gadget special kind of player who can run and pass and do all the stuff. And then you got Mitchell who kind of just is pretty speedy and likes the one-cut go. And then TDP is a bit more of upside in the tackle, smash it upside inside the tackle. So we've got kind of a breadth of differences of, you got the bruising running, you've got the one cut go, and then you've got the McCaffrey just giving the ball and he'll do something special. Mason's in there again, somewhere between Mitchell and TDP as a bruising, but also one cut guy. He's kind of got that kind of combo, which is why I think he got so much carry and so much sort of traction last year. But, with Shanahan, it could be one of those three guys, or it could be any of the other guys he picked. He picked up a running back, I think, late in rounds this year as well. So that guy could be the hot hand, and Shanahan just gives him the ball because, that's what he does. He finds. Did we not pick? I thought we picked up running back. No, we didn't. I think we did undrafted. We picked up one or something. So yeah, he keeps us guessing at running back, which is great. Running back by committee is horrible for fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you go with McCaffrey. You still think McCaffrey's probably a first rounder because he's going to be in there for at least 2, maybe 3 pick and choose.
Well, yeah. So I'm glad you brought up fantasy, and we'll talk about that, throughout as well. But I do have a dynasty league, and last year I picked up Tyrion Davis Price, and I've got him, kind of stashed away. And so that is my question. Then, I mean, do you see him getting enough work in this offense to be fantasy relevant? Like even in it's a 10-team dynasty league at any point, like maybe this year or next year, or is he just going to be kind of like a rotation guy?
I think I hate the fact, but it's going to come back to who's under center. Right? Because under center with Trey Lance, I think TDP gets a little bit more because of the inside run style and the fact that with having Trey Lance back there, and it was obvious when, at the beginning of last season, that was the kind of run format that Shanahan was using. He was using the inside run because of, Trey's a big guy, he can cut outside, whatever else. And he was using bruise it up the middle. And if it's not there, we do the RPOs and Trey can break it outside and whatever else. If Purdy's under center, I think TDP suffers because it's going to be more of the Garoppolo-esque style 49ers, where it's kind of a lot of outside zones, a lot of shorts, a lot of round sweeps, and, not up the middle, which doesn't favor TDP. So
that is interesting. So then you look at the QB situation. Obviously, Purdy was, solid. And you still have Trey Lance kind of, obviously in the
unknown,
mix.
Just a complete unknown. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, what do you see with Brock Purdy? Does he have high enough a ceiling, or was it just kind of like because of the offense that he was in?
I suppose it's half and half, right? Because Jimmy came in when Trey went down and ran the offense, recently. They'll turn it around. There was a couple of horrible games that we will never mention ever again. Especially as a UK fan, you had to stay up very late to watch that horrid game last year. But, and everyone was like, well, see, it's Shanahan, it's his offense that can kind of do this. And then Purdy came in after Jimmy went down and really seemed to unlock it. And everyone's like, wow, this guy's amazing. But I want to counter that with Purdy came in and McCaffrey came in.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was Purdy or if it was Purdy and McCaffrey. I think it's probably a combo because teams suddenly think, hang on, Christian McCaffrey's in the backfield. We have to give that guy a little bit more than, you looked, and without being too disrespectful to the other running backs. Right? The defense would be like, it's a running back. It's a running back style. He's going to hit the hole or he's going to run up the middle. You go, that's Christian McCaffrey. He can cut, he can spin, he can do it. So they have to kind of scheme a little bit around that, which then opens up your tight end. It then opens up your short and running plays. It opens up more for your QB. So I don't know if it was Purdy. I mean, I love the guy. I think coming in, everyone loves the story, Mr. Irrelevant, and he played lights out. Some of the games he played against the Buccaneers, I thought was amazing when he did that. He kind of literally had no qualms, ice in his veins and all that sort of stuff. Is it the offense? Was it the McCaffrey gadget? Was it a combination of the offense, McCaffrey, and Purdy being calm? I think what people missed out on with Purdy is how many years he played as a starter in college. He's played more football than Trey Lance by a number of years. So he's had the experience. So I think that really helped him to just kind of step in and go, I've done this, I played this, I know what's going on. So I thought it was amazing what he did, and the story was everything. But from a QB conspiracy theory, because you can't do anything as a 49er fan without there being a QB conspiracy at the moment. Well, we mortgaged a lot, we sold a lot, we gave a lot for Trey Lance. And we just haven't had the chance to see it.
Yeah, I think that's tough because, I'm an Iowa Hawkeye, so I had the chance to see, Brock Purdy in college, and he was – he had a lot of high highs and some low lows at Iowa State, versus my team, but he obviously was able to command an offense, and he was a fiery guy in college, and obviously was last year. And so obviously when you look at him, he's got the talent, and everything. But when you look at Trey Lance, I mean, obviously you did give up a lot for him. I mean, do you see? I mean, have you heard anything about them trying to trade him, or is it possible that he might eventually supplant Purdy as a quarterback?
It's interesting that we're talking about the number 3 draft pick supplanting the number 272 draft pick from 2 years later, right? It's bizarre that how quickly it turns. Because last year, like beginning of last year, it was Trey's team. It was everyone knew Trey was number 1. It was Trey's team, and that was how it was going to be. He sat for a year, whatever else. He's had a couple, got banged up, whatever else. Unfortunately, now it's him. Now it's his time to shine. Jimmy was going to move on. Blah, blah, blah. So it was all Trey's team, and we were all set for that. And it had, you don't give up that many draft picks. You don't go up, three first rounds. We're still struggling now. This year we didn't, as you mentioned about getting in the first round and getting one of those O-linemen or something. We didn't have the opportunity. We had to find out what was down later on. So we've given up so much. We have to give him the reins. We have to see, because nobody's, I'm sure people phoned up. I'm sure teams phoned who were QB needy and kind of went, this guy seemed to be pretty good, college. They gave up a lot for him. He must have something, but nobody's seen it. I wonder if we can get him for, a late second rounder, or, I wonder, I would be remiss and probably naive to think that there weren't calls and the 49ers weren't probably slightly listening depending on what the offer was. I just think maybe, I think if it happened, I think whatever was offered wasn't palatable enough. And it would have to be, when you look at it, because they'd get absolutely lambasted by the team, by the media, and by the fans if they took a third round 2024 pick for him, right? You'd be like, hang on, we gave up 3 first rounders plus blah, 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 and you're giving him away for a late second round and a veteran QB and a veteran wide receiver or something. So I think it had to be the right offer, and I don't think that came in.
Well, yeah, especially, Purdy did well, but I think when you look at an NFL quarterback, they have to prove it over, season. It's just like, any good quarterback. If you're in the NFL, you can make the throws, things like that. Obviously, you brought up Christian McCaffrey. That was a great point right there. But yeah, you want to see a quarterback continue to make it consistent year after year to really give him the reins. And Trey Lance has a ton of talent. And all that, and
obviously and all that sort of stuff. So
it's so interesting how you look at teams in the NFL, and the 49ers have remained in the mix with just such a murky quarterback situation with Jimmy G for a number of years. That has to, obviously the organization doing something right to have all the pieces. Quarterback is the most important, position in NFL, and to not have it quite right yet and still being in the mix year in and year out, it's just amazing to me.
It's a phenomenal sort of front office. However they've done it, and piece of magic or whatever John Lynch and Shanahan have done to make that happen. Because as you say, most teams go out and franchise their whole thing around one guy, get the QB. This year we saw it, Houston, they've got their guy and they traded up and down, whatever else, and the Panthers, gave up the house to get that number 1 pick because that's the guy you build around and everything else. And it just seems, I don't know how we've done it. And I've had a chat with one of we have a show on Let's Talk Sport where the NFC West guys, and there's 4 of us, we all get together. They hate the fact, and they're like, how have you done this? You've sold your future on a guy from a QB perspective, from like 3 first rounds and whatever else you gave up for Trey Lance, who's been busted up and you've not even seen him, yet somehow your organization has flourished, almost got stronger, and is in more championship games without having your number 1 QB than you were without it. It's like they can't, and it's baffling, because most organizations would have probably, if they'd whiffed so badly on a first round QB, and I don't want to say we've whiffed because we've just not seen him, but it could be classed as a whiff, would have probably tanked for 2 or 3 of those seasons and
Mhm.
been getting pretty good draft picks in return for the bad seasons. But somehow we've gone and got a guy. Jimmy steadied the ship, and Jimmy's such a polarizing character for the 49ers fans.
Mhm.
It's quite interesting. Yes, there's a ceiling. We all know that Jimmy does, and that we've all been through the Jimmy roller coaster.
Mhm.
But it's quite interesting to talk to fans if they remember the pre-Jimmy roller coaster,
Mhm.
because that was ugly, really ugly. And I've got nothing but praise for Jimmy, because he came in and turned our franchise from also Rams and just making up the numbers in the NFC West to actually being relevant and turning the mentality around. Yes, we all learned his limitations, and he was never the same after his knee injury and all the sorts of stuff that came with it.
Mhm.
But what he did for the franchise and the mentality and everything else, I've got nothing but praise for the guy, and I do wish him well in Vegas, just not too much.
Well, it's interesting. Obviously, running or wide receivers are an important part as well. And you talked about the wide receiver core and not having an elite talent. I have talked to 49er podcasters and people in the past, and they really like what Brandon Ayuk, what he brings to the team. Deebo Samuel has kind of been that gadget player that the last couple of years people have been trying to find comp for their team. So why do you say Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk aren't in the elite category yet?
And I suppose it's weird because probably as players and as skill set players they are, because Ayuk's route running is outstanding. He's so clean. We've seen him put defenders, top class elite CBs on their backsides with the way he cuts and moves. So I suppose if you think elite wide receivers, you're thinking JJ Cooper. They just don't get that sort of number. And I suppose from a specifically as we say from a fantasy perspective, you want to put you'd probably pick Deebo out of those two, and Ayuk because if he's available in the late 7th or 8th, right? You'd go, well, yeah, take a shot on him, but you're not going to go and use. Because they just don't get that production numbers from a fantasy perspective because they're not targeted as much, because it is a outside run heavy game, or it's motions and flips and moves and using every single person on the offense lineman or whatever else. You don't know who the ball's going to, so you can't elite those two guys in that sort of perspective. From a skill set perspective, I love what Brandon Ayuk. I think he's our wide receiver one, to be honest, because of his numbers and the route he does and stuff. And as you say, Deebo's just that. Put him in wherever wildcat player, whatever. He could play every position and skill position that we have. But I just think you look at an elite wide receiving core. You look at who the 1 and 2 is. You know what numbers they're going to get. You know how they're going to work. We just don't have that consistent. And again, it comes back to who's your QB, because the QBs make your elite wide receivers, right? And we've not had that. So,
well, speaking of kind of an elite receiving target, George Kittle has been up there. Now, I don't know if it's injuries or kind of just kind of quarterback play. When you look at him, where do you see his place in the offense? Is he kind of almost become that, receiving one above Ayuk because of just what he's meant, or is he kind of fallen off a little bit?
I hate to rehash the same answer, but it depends who's under center.
Yeah.
I think if it's Purdy under center, George Kittle will get a lot more catches and a lot more targets. I think if Trey Lance is under center, he's going to be used a little bit more in the chipping, blocking, maybe getting out to the flat as a kind of an outlet option, because Trey Lance has got a bomb of an arm. He's going to be looking bigger, deeper throws and stretching the field with some speedy guys and whatever else. So I think again it's annoying that we're in the position where we go, I think George Kittle should be a tight end 3 or 4 in fantasy, right? And we all know that skill set wise, when he blows up, he's totally unplayable. but for 4 games of the season, he'll have 1 catch for 6 yards, and you're pulling your hair out, and you're like, why didn't I put Andrews in, or why didn't I put, and he's been outscored by people that you're like, how is this guy outscoring George Kittle, who is almost Mr. Football from a Niners perspective if you watch him play and stuff. And I think George is a kind of a slight victim of his own success in he loves to get down and dirty, and he loves the blocking, and he loves that kind of lineman sort of mentality. And every now and again he just breaks out and catches a pass and runs over half the defense. But I think he just loves that sort of nitty-gritty football. He just wants to play football, right? And if he was more he's not a big body tight end like Kelsey, but if we used him in a more productive way, I think he would be easily be tight end 2 or 3 in fantasy. But we just don't. Shanahan's offense doesn't seem to give him that opportunity, and sometimes it's frustrating as a fan. We're just like, just get the ball to Kittle. We know he'll get you a first down. We know he's going to get, he's going to break a tackle, or he's going to do something. The Dallas game was a prime example in the playoff. He just made an absolute, worldie of a catch, because it's what he does when you finally get the ball to him. But sometimes it's like, it's the 3rd quarter and George Kittle hasn't caught the pass yet. Sometimes it's like, frustrating. And
I was going to say, I was going to say, I mean, as far as, tight ends, I usually take them later on in the draft. And I am an Iowa guy. I love George Kittle. I love everything that he brings to the football field. But I mean, you kind of look at the quarterback, you kind of look at offenses. There's some offenses or some coaches, I think, that, could care less about fantasy. I mean, anything, on the Patriots, I try to stay away from them because you just never know. But Shanahan,
they stink this for the last couple of years as well. But
they have, exactly. And Shanahan, running backs, obviously that's kind of been the thing. But obviously he's cycled in and out different running backs, even wide receivers. It seems like I've heard he has a doghouse as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's why Ayuk took a while to get going, because I think it was, and I feel for Ayuk. He came out of college. He didn't get a preseason because COVID and everything else. So he kind of never got this is the NFL. This is kind of how you do it. You kind of like, hey, I got signed by the Niners. Great. Go away and train in in your own gym at home, and don't have how to be an NFL player brought up to you. And I think he came out, and he, in his 2nd season, he came in and he had OTAs and he had early, so he turned up and he was like, I'm the number 1 receiver. Look at me. And suddenly went, oh, wait, this is what being in the NFL is like. Mm-hmm. And I think he took that to heart, and he kind of went, I kind of coasted the first year. I got away with it because he didn't know what was all about, and got found out a little bit towards the sort of middle to the end of the first season. And he came back and put his head down and realized that to be an NFL wide receiver, you've got to put the effort in, you've got to put the work in, you've got to get to the gym, you've got to do all the stuff. But it's not just the physical side, it's all the the teamwork in the building and all that sort of stuff. And I think he got himself out of Shanahan's doghouse. But I think, again, from an Ayuk perspective, I don't think it was his own fault that he ended up in the doghouse, because he just, the world went crazy for that sort of period. So he didn't have this is how to be a receiver mentee sort of, when you're a rookie, you walk in, you look at the seniors, you look at those guys who have been around and veterans, and you learn how to do it. He's like, well done, you're a 49er. Disappear back to wherever you go and train at home back in your high school or back at college. It's like, that's so bizarre. But it's interesting that it does seem that Shanahan has, I want to say favorites, because I don't think he has favorites, but he just doesn't care who gets the ball. As you say, he doesn't sit there and go, maybe I wonder for my fantasy team whether or not I should give the ball to him. But it's just like, whoever's catching the ball in training, or whoever's, looks good in running back, or just get something. He just like, you're the guy, and it doesn't matter. So he doesn't care. And it does impact and does obviously affect production for all of the skill set players. But in the end, if the team wins, as a Niner fan, I don't care.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, one of the main, bright spots for the 49ers over the last few years has been the defense. And when you look at the defense, I was actually also in a really deep dynasty league, that had IDP. And I don't know if you've
Mm.
played, IDP, and I was kind of looking, and I didn't know a lot about IDP when I started it, and I was looking at some of the players, and I picked up Hufanga, and
Ooh.
and that really helped me propel me into the playoffs, and I really, kind of looked at him, for constant production. So when you look at this defense, for the season, what are some of the key players that you see? Obviously, you got Nick Bosa, and what are some of the other ones that you see
Yeah.
are going to be the most impactful?
I think it was interesting. Obviously, the free agency pickup of Hargreave, I thought was
Mhm.
beautiful. It's a instant plug-in. He's going to get better with our defensive line coach. Chris Kachek is just like, I don't know what he does, what magic he does at the defensive line, but we kind of roll through those guys, and they all go off and get big paydays, and we get production out of them. So to go and get Hargreave and put him into that system, I think he's gonna fly. And either he'll be amazing this year, or Bosa will be even better this year, because now we've got one at each end, and like the teams could, last year they could kind of go, well, Bosa's going to be the guy. Let's kind of double him. Now they're like, which one? So that's going to be amazing. I think we need to look out for. I see Dre Greenlaw having a big year. I think he's going to be. I know Fred Warner is the captain and basically the QB of our defense, and he's just amazing. I'm worried about the third and fourth linebackers. I know we've got Oren Burks, who kind of came on from the special team last year and stepping through, and we picked up a couple of rookies and stuff. But Al-Shaair has gone, and he was a great third linebacker to step in there. So that's a slight concern.
Mm-hmm.
And who's going to fill that one? I think, as I say, Jair Brown is great. He should sit for most of the year behind Gibson, because we got to Sean Gibson to sign for another year, which an amazing piece of business for some, I think, veteran minimum or something. He's just signed up for just so he can stay playing, and because he wants to stay in the Bay and whatever else. And that's an amazing piece of business. Jimmy Ward going is obviously a shame. I'll say it's a shame because there's one guy from the 49er Faithful UK who's not a big Jimmy fan. But from a longest tenured, been around, knew what was going on. It's a shame to see him go, but he wanted the money and he got paid, so fair play to him. So yeah, I don't think our secondary got any weaker, which is great. I think it's benefit that Jair will be in. We've got a couple of guys from last year who were on the edges, and I think we'll step through and play in nickel. Sammy Womack's the guy I'm thinking. I think he's going to come through and play nickel a lot more. So I think our defense is sound. I don't think, as I say, that the depth at linebacker might be if Fred gets banged up and if Dre Greenlaw gets banged up. Is the second, third, and fourth guys going to be just as able to run the defense? And obviously, it's a new defense this year as well, so that's going to be interesting. Where Steve Wilkes has come over, and it be slightly different.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting when you look at changing coaches. I love that you brought up like changing like the scheme, because it's just making sure all the players fit as well. And so obviously Steve Wilkes has been a great coach in the NFL. I mean, what does he bring then to the 49ers?
I think it's interesting because lots of our, there was an expectation. We had a linebacker coach who was our defensive coach, right? And so they've had that all gas, all break, no breaks on Salah. And then again, last year, and that's continued. And he's not, the coaching tree is obviously there now. It's gone out everywhere. I thought there was an assumption maybe, or a thought process that Chris Kuchek, the defensive line coach, would step up, but he's been like, no, I want to stay where I am. He's quite happy. I think Wilkes brings, interestingly enough, obviously DB experience, and I think that he's going to give the secondary a lot of time and attention, because it's always historically the secondary's been slightly the weaker of our defensive units. Because maybe because we've been blessed with draft picks and front office and doing some things really well at the front. Our secondary's always been a concern or a worry and whatever else. If the front seven don't quite get there, and then a mobile quarterback gets out, Russell Wilson being a prime example, used to coke us, twice a year because he could get outside and not see the secondary, but never quite hold up. So I think that's going to be somewhere where he'll look to kind of bring some clarity and bring some experience do, and I hope so, because as I say, we've got a lot of rookies from last year coming through. We went quite heavy on our secondary, so I hope that they'll come through.
Well, speaking of coming through, obviously we have the schedule now. I'm sure you've had a chance to kind of look at it. Realistically, when you look at the 2023 49ers schedule, what are your expectations?
It's an interesting one. So you blindly go 20-0, we're winning Super Bowl, right? Because every fan does. You're just like, we're winning everything, we're winning everything. And then you go, okay, wait a minute, let's have a think about it. Let's double check some of these issues. And, so I think we're playing 4 teams who come off of a bye. So they're going to be rested before they play us. And there's a horrible sort of schedule around Thanksgiving where it's like, flip over, it's back to back, it's Seattle, Dallas, and Seattle again, or something. There's kind of a little nasty section there and bits and pieces. So I looked at it and I thought, initially I meant 17-0, we're going to win everything, doesn't matter. And then you go back through it, and I've got us either 13-4, 14-3. It depends on which ones. I think some of the teams who are coming in, I think the Bengals are going to give us a real problem when they come to town, especially, as I say, they're coming off of a bye week. They'll be rested. They'll come in and they'll be doing that. I think the Christmas Day game is going to be an interesting one. The Ravens, it could be easy for us because the Ravens could have imploded and whatever else, because sometimes, it depends on which Ravens turn up. But now that, they have, and it could be interesting with the Ravens. I'm quite interested to see what the Ravens are going to do, because they drafted a really good wide receiver. They then went out and got OBJ. They've got Bateman back. They've got some of their, and it's like, are they going to start throwing it? Is Lamar going to throw it now? That'd be interesting. So I'm a bit uncertain about that one. And then I do think we'll probably. The Seahawks have done really well, really quickly. I thought the Seahawks were going to be in the doldrums for a while, and they've, by fleecing the Broncos, they've managed to completely, turn around their season, and turn around their franchise in a very short space of time. They've drafted really well in the last 2 seasons. I think they're going to be there and thereabouts, really pushing us. So I think we'll split one with the Seahawks. And then, who did I have as the other loss? Bengals, Ravens, Seahawks.
So a couple interesting games I look at, and obviously we're not sure what Deshaun Watson's going to be like, but obviously at the Browns is going to be interesting. October 15th. I mean,
again, the Browns coming off of a bye for that as well.
Yeah. And I don't hear you kind of all that scared about the Cowboys at all.
No. Nope. That's it. I mean, we've got the Cowboys number. It's great that we're playing them. I mean, from when I started watching, Cowboys were the rival, right? And still are to me. I mean, it's quite. You can age your fan group by saying, when you say who is a team you want to lose to, who you want to watch. It's like, I know it's Cowboys. I mean, a lot of the UK fans are like, no, Seahawks. I hate the Seahawks. It's like, no, I hate the Cowboys. I hate the Cowboys more. I'm like, why? We don't play them. We don't. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. When you start, when you fall in love with the game and you find your team's rival at that time, it will always be the Cowboys to me. So yeah, I'm looking forward. It's a great time for them to come in terms of, from a 49er perspective, because it's the end of Fleet Week, it's party week in San Francisco, and then the Cowboys come to town. So it'll be an amazing Sunday night game. It'll be a great experience. But I've got no qualms. I don't think they'll have enough to get. We've got their number, and in the last few seasons, we've certainly given them enough embarrassing things, and the memes and the socials in the lead up to that week are going to be amazing.
So we've talked about quarterbacks, and obviously it depends. A lot of the offense, depends on who's under center. When you look at it, there are reports that Brock Purdy could be ready for the start of the season. I believe, is that right?
Yeah, according to surgical and all the things, he's on schedule to be back for training camp, to be literally throwing and having a QB battle to see who's QB1 in training.
So when you look at that, I mean, or even Trey Lance, I mean, when you look at either one of these quarterbacks, or maybe, Purdy more, specifically, you look at some of the games, does that worry you, some of the road games with Purdy at all?
I suppose second season syndrome is a worry because he had such a great end of season. He came in and just lit it up. Everyone was like, "Who's this guy?" And, he went to Seattle and won the NFC West, so he can play on the road in hostile environments. We know that. And as you say, at Iowa State, he played a lot of games in a lot of hostile places. So I don't think that the odd road game is an issue. I mean, there's a couple where we have to travel to the East Coast and stay over and be away for a while and whatever else. So, yeah, there's all sort of nuances of that second season that might impact him. So I suppose it's something unknown, but then you could say the same about Trey if it's Trey, because he's not had the time or the seasons or anything else. So he's still almost, inevitably you could say he's in his second season syndrome, but it's even in it's almost like a rookie season for Trey. So that's the concern is, both of our QBs are rookies. So that has got to be a worry. Yes, Brock showed that he can play for 6 or 7 games, but, some rookies come in and just hit the ground running and have that lucky streak. And because, as I say, McCaffrey was in and the offense was clicking and who knows, there could have been all sorts of things, backs against the wall. We're now down to our backup QB, backup QB, Mr. Irrelevant. Maybe the team are all a bit like, oh, we've got a chip on our shoulder. This year, maybe it doesn't quite click as much. Who knows?
So, I mean, you talk about rivalries as well. And it is always interesting, kind of the teams, when you start liking them, what teams are their biggest rival. And that can change over time. When you look at like how good teams are and everything. When you look at the Eagles, because everyone's kind of saying 49ers, Eagles are kind of right up there. That game versus the Eagles at the Eagles, do you see that as kind of a barometer for where the season will go?
It's probably a measuring stick. Right? I don't want to say it's a barometer because I think one game could, if you put too much emphasis on one game, you could kind of derail the rest of the games and you can lose track of, all focused on that Philly game at the beginning of December and then suddenly lose a game against Washington or something, right? No disrespect, but the Commanders are, brand new team, whatever. Even if they're going to be called the Commanders with the new guy, who knows? But there's games there that we should not lose, and you can easily lose focus by saying just it's all on the Philly game. And if we lose the Philly game in the next week, suddenly it's like, we lose to. I'm trying to remember where our bye is. Is it after the Philly game? I think it's up. I think it's just no. I think we've got the bye before the Philly game. I think, but yeah, I think there's a Bucks game or something.
Yes, right? It does look like that. Yep.
So we could lose focus, but we're focusing on the Philly game and lose focus and lose a game against somebody else. I think it'll be a measuring stick to see. I think it'll be a great game. I don't want it to be built up as the rematch and the game that could have been, but of course it's going to be. Hopefully, everybody's. It's nice that it's not game 1 or game 2. Because then both teams have had a chance to kind of knock the rust off, get up to speed, whatever else. And I envision it being the battle for the number 1 seed in the NFC. I don't see who else. I think the playoffs this year will be very similar from an NFC perspective as last year. I don't think there's going to be too many surprises. It's going to be the same teams, apart from maybe in the North. That might change a little bit. But I think that Philly game will be. I think the Philly game will be a barometer, and it will be the number 1 seed playoff sort of game. But I don't want it to be the one that defines our season. I think it will just be a one to highlight and watch out for.
So I know fans don't like that, and podcasters don't like to do this necessarily. But you're kind of targeting like 13 or so wins. What would the worst case scenario be for the 49ers? And would they be able to turn that into a positive?
I mean, it's a tough schedule because
it is.
It is a tough schedule for the NFC West. We've got to play some really tough teams.
I like what Seattle's done. Just overall, they had a great draft as well.
And from a purely, what's the worst that could happen if we went 9-8 and Seattle took the West? I mean, it could happen. It's football, right? mix-ups of QBs, another injury, another whatever, something happens, McCaffrey goes down, and the worry McCaffrey and his injuries and stuff. So there's all sorts that could and couldn't happen. But I suppose that's the worst scenario. I can't see us not making the playoffs in the NFC. Right? I just don't think there's enough better teams, even if we have a few bad weeks. I still reckon we're playoff. But I think if Seattle took the West and we ended up on a wild card and had to go first up to Philly maybe or something like that, because Philly will be number 1 seed and we scrape in as 7 and we have to go to Philly. That's probably the worst case scenario, and we have to then play on the road and wherever we go.
Yeah, I mean, because you look at it, LA is going to be interesting to see, what they do. Obviously, they've got Stafford, but they've gotten rid of a lot of players.
Well, they got Stafford for now until he gets properly hit, right? And then who knows?
A good point too. That's a good point too. And I feel like the Cardinals, they're. I mean, we'll see how long Hopkins stays with them, and they're going to miss Murray.
And who the QB Murray's. Yep. Is he back? Is he not? Is he going to start the season? He's going to come halfway in. Is it? I think he's going to miss the first 3 or 4 at least. I think.
I thought I heard even 6 games. Yeah,
6, potentially. Yeah. Colt McCoy is he's Colt McCoy, right?
He's going, yeah.
But I think they've got more pressing concerns in other areas that I think the Cardinals, they've done. I mean, to be honest, they drafted really well this year and they've set themselves up really well for next year's draft. But that shows you what they're expecting for this year, because their expectation next year, they could quite easily be sitting with the 1 and 2 draft picks and really be able to kind of really reset their whole franchise by that. And, they've got their own one. They've got Houston's first round for next year as well. And that could, worst case scenario, could end up being number 1 and number 2 pick. And they could, they could really own the draft next year. But I think that just shows that Arizona probably aren't in the mix this year.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, I mean, it is a tough schedule for the 49ers, but division-wise, I mean, really all you have to do is win your division or be up there close to it, because especially in the NFC, I mean, there are a lot of teams, the Vikings, I mean, they don't really scare, I'm sure they don't really scare you when you think of, I mean, they're going to have to take a regression as far as their, 1-score games that they won. The Lions,
they were the worst 13-win team last year, but they had negative points or differential or something, didn't they? They were like +2 or something. They managed to scrape so many 1-score games that they got through. The Lions, I thought the Lions were going to streak away with the North, but now with the whole gambling suspension, what the hell was going on in the franchise? It's obviously, talking about with other guys, it's like it's a shame that Jamal Williams still we don't get another full season of Jamal Williams because of whatever else,
So
that was an interesting one, because I just wonder, it's obviously inherent in the franchise because there were a lot of, it's happening in the building, and there was a lot of other guys who got, let go or sacked or whatever else. So
I was going to say, you brought up the Lions, and I wanted to bring up, obviously, as a 49ers fan, you saw Goff, firsthand for years. So, and I've gone back and forth with Lions fans about this, obviously, they just thought he was this amazing quarterback with the Rams, and he carried them to the Super Bowl. So talk a little bit about what you saw from Goff, when he was the Rams versus the 49ers. He doesn't scare you, does he?
He doesn't. He's not one of those scary QBs. You know what you're going to get. You know how to limit the damage that he can do. Right? You can scheme quite easily. He's not going to be a off playbook kind of QB. He's not a Mahomes. He's not a Hurts. He's not an Allen who play breaks down, roll out, bomb it down the field, run legs, throw, whatever. Goff, you keep him in the pocket, you collapse that pocket, put the pressure on him. That's how to break it down, and that's how to use your front seven to pressure. He never scared us, and we never concerned traveling to the Rams or whatever else. And fair play to him. He went to the Lions, and he's been kind of gunslinger, and he's thrown it around, and he's kind of scored a lot of points. And the Lions should have done a lot better last year if their defense just stepped up a little bit, because they let in, they scored a lot of points. They could have beaten a lot of teams, but they just couldn't stop any other team scoring. So, and I thought they'd be doing well. And maybe being at Detroit is helping Goff in terms of expectation, because you went to the Rams, who's number one pick, or very early draft pick. He had so much expectation on him to be the face of the Rams and the LA team and all that sort of stuff. And I think that maybe got to him a little bit. Now at Detroit, he's not. The expectation isn't quite as there, and it's a bit quieter. It's a bit less in the spotlight. Detroit, everyone knows Detroit is kind of a middle team, right? They're never quite there and whatever else, and they've been that way for, unfortunately, a long time.
Well, the expectations are all there now, so that's going to be interesting to see. Obviously it helped Goff to have that offensive line, just to really kind of protect him, but he did really has to prove it as well. And you look at the NFC. All the teams, the 49ers are going to be the mix regardless. And it's going to be exciting to see, how they've done well. And actually, I've been kind of a little bit of a 49er fan, obviously, with Kittle, but then obviously with how the 49ers have done against the Packers. I always love seeing the 49ers beat the Packers in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, it's always nice when you can call the Packers and just know that it's just one of those teams that you've got their number, and it doesn't matter. MVP and fair play. Aaron Rodgers is an absolutely amazing QB.
Mm-hmm.
But the memes are out there of the face and him lying there going, "What's going on?" Because he's just been steamrolled, and the Niners just somehow always found a way. And it's quite odd, because there's teams out there that have got our number, and you just think, how? Why can't we beat that team? Why can't we beat the Falcons recently? It's just the Falcons, but somehow that right. And so it's teams like that. It's quite odd, but it's nice when you've got that. And as I say, against Dallas, we've got that as well. It's always big games as well on teams like that. That's what makes that so good, is that they're usually playoff games or big games. You don't get to play Dallas that often. You don't get to play Green Bay that often. And when you do, it's only because it's towards the end of the season and there's a lot riding on it. And that's what makes those games amazing. So yes, we're blessed with having great records against those, but then there's other teams out there who just don't want to play.
Well, this has been fantastic. I definitely appreciate you coming on. Where can everyone find you again, Gary?
So you can get me on Let's Talk Sports. I kind of do a number of different shows for Dan, and Dan's been brilliant. I jumped on a show very much similar to this. He jumped on a show and talked about 49ers with a couple of 49ers guys, and he went, "Hey, you don't seem to care about being on camera and podcast and stuff." But yeah, sure. I might talk about, I can talk about sports to the cows come home, and not just NFL, but everything else. So Dan's kind of said, "Hey, jump in and help us out." So tomorrow I'll be doing an F1 show on Let's Talk Sports. Then I'll be doing a football, round ball football, soccer ball on Tuesday with a couple of guys, Italy Jet and Matty will be jumping on, and we'll be doing that. And then I'll be in and around all the other socials, kind of firing stuff off as and when needed. I just kind of jump on as many shows when I can, but obviously it's all fun and games. This is all as we do, we do it for the love of sport. So it's not the be all and end all, but you can get me at Groovy on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and all the other whatevers. And that's 463.
Yeah, 4 R's, 6 O's, and 3 V's. Yes, yes. Well, thanks again, Gary. I appreciate it. Once again, this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the San Francisco 49ers with Gary Thorpe from Let's Talk Sport. Like, subscribe, follow him on social, follow me on social, and obviously looking forward to the season. Thanks again.
Thanks. Go Niners. Cheers, Andy.